The air in the Grand Plaza was thick with the scent of roasted chestnuts and damp cobblestone, a familiar perfume of late autumn in the city. I stood near the fountain, its bronze sirens weeping silent, verdigris tears. Around me, the evening crowd moved in its usual muted ballet, a choreography of avoidance. We were masters of the unspoken, a society built on the careful architecture of anonymity. We knew each other by our functions, our clothes, our gaits. The baker with flour on his elbows. The watchmaker with the loop squint. The woman with the red scarf. I was the archivist from Sector 7, a title that felt both like a designation and a cage. Then it happened. It began with a sound so alien it sliced through the gentle hum of the city like a shard of glass. A laugh, not a polite chuckle, but a full-throated, uninhibited roar of joy. A young couple, no older than 20, were chasing each other around the fountain's edge. He was the boy with the paint-stained jacket. She was the girl with the silver earrings. They were in love, and it made them careless. He caught her, spinning her around. Her laughter pealed again, and in a moment of pure, reckless ecstasy, she looked into his eyes and spoke the ultimate transgression. She spoke his name. For a heartbeat, nothing. The word hung in the air, shimmering and beautiful, a perfect, forbidden syllable. I saw it on her lips. I felt it in my chest, a phantom vibration. The boy's eyes widened, not in fear, but in recognition, in a sudden, profound sense of being seen. He opened his mouth, a mirror of her adoration, and in that fatal, reciprocal instant, he spoke hers. The effect was immediate and horrific. It was not an explosion or a scream. It was a subtraction. The boy with the paint-stained jacket began to flicker, like a faulty projection. His edges blurred, his colors draining into the gray twilight. The girl clutched at him, her face a mask of confusion, then terror, as her hands passed through his fading form. "What's happening?" she cried, but the second name, her own name, had already doomed her. She too began to dissolve. The crowd didn't run. They didn't scream. They simply stopped. A collective, instinctive freeze. Eyes went vacant. Faces smoothed into blank canvases. This was the silence, the great defense mechanism. As the couple dissipated into nothing more than a swirl of dust motes in the lamplight, the memory of them was being simultaneously erased from every mind that had witnessed it. A citywide amnesia, swift and surgical. They were gone. They had never been. The space they occupied was now just empty air. The baker stared at his hands, as if wondering why he'd stopped kneading phantom dough. The watchmaker adjusted his spectacles, a flicker of confusion in his eyes before it was washed away. The flow of the crowd resumed, parting around a space that no longer held any meaning. But for me, it was different. I am an archivist. My mind is trained to hold patterns, to see the ghosts of what has been removed. While the specific memory of the couple was gone, a searing, white-hot blank in my consciousness, an echo remained. A profound sense of loss, a sorrow that had no source. My heart ached for two people I could not remember. It was a wound without a weapon, a grief without a grave. I could feel the shape of their absence, a hole punched through the fabric of the moment. My hand trembled as I pressed it to my chest, the rhythm of my own heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Everyone else was already moving on, their inner world scrubbed clean. But I stood frozen, haunted by the ghost of a memory. This was not the first time. For years, I had felt these phantom pains, these inexplicable ripples in the placid surface of our world. I was trained to record the official history, a history with all the names redacted, a history of roles and events, not people. But my own mind seemed to be a faulty archive, one that held onto the shadows of the redacted. As the last of the evening light bled from the sky, a new figure emerged from the periphery. Tall, clad in a long, featureless gray coat, his face obscured by shadow. A silencer, the enforcers of the unnaming. He didn't look at the empty space. He didn't need to. He looked at the crowd, his gaze sweeping, searching for any flicker of residual memory, any sign that the erasure was incomplete. His eyes passed over me, and for a terrifying second, I felt an intense, cold pressure in my mind, a psychic probe. I forced my face into a mask of placid ignorance, the same emptiness I saw on everyone else. I thought of my work, of the dusty ledgers and the ink-stained fingers. I became the archivist. He moved on. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The echo of the two lost lovers still resonated within me, a silent, screaming question. Why them? Why this terrible, absolute punishment for an act of love? But there was a more dangerous question, one that pulsed with my own heartbeat. Everyone else forgot. Why didn't I? What was wrong with my mind that it refused to let the ghost go? The archive was my sanctuary and my prison. A colossal rotunda of gray stone and steel, its shelves spiraled 30 stories high, disappearing into the perpetual gloom of the vaulted ceiling. It smelled of aging paper, ozone, and the faint, metallic scent of the redaction fluid we used. Millions of lives were stored here, their stories meticulously documented and then systematically hollowed out. Births, deaths, appointments, transfers, all recorded, all stripped of the one thing that made them unique. Names were the original sin, the forbidden fruit of identity. And here, in this grand library of ghosts, we were the keepers of the void. My workspace was a small corral overlooking the central floor. From here, I could see the other archivists, hunched over their desks in pools of yellow light, their movements slow and deliberate. We were a quiet order, monks in service to a doctrine of absence. Our daily ritual was a study in precision. A new batch of documents would arrive from the municipal registrars, birth certificates, work assignments, death notices. Our job was to transcribe them into the Great Ledger, replacing the handwritten names with a state-assigned alphanumeric code. B. 773, A91. D. 451, C22. A sterile, efficient string of characters that anchored a person to the system, not to themselves. The new consignment from the medical district are ready for processing. A voice said, soft and devoid of inflection. It was the senior scribe, a man I knew only by the stoop of his shoulders and the perpetual ink stain on his right thumb. I will see to them. I replied, my own voice a practiced monotone. We didn't make eye contact for long. It was an unspoken rule. Eyes were too revealing. They held too much of the self you were supposed to suppress. I spent the morning transcribing. A new life, designated C, 109, F47, born to the glassblower from the East Quarter and the seamstress from the Canal Apartments. A death, G, 822, B11, the dock worker with a limp, cause of passing, industrial accident. Each entry was a tiny tragedy of depersonalization. Who was this dock worker? Did he love the sea? Did he have a family who mourned the man, not just the function? The files wouldn't say. His name, the unique sound that had belonged only to him, was now a classified secret, locked away in a sub-basement vault that not even I had access to. It would be held there until his code was reassigned in a century, his last link to existence severed forever. This was the world built after the Great Fracturing. The official history, the one I was paid to preserve, told of a time when the cult of the individual had run rampant. People obsessed with their names, their legacies, their personal brands, had torn society apart. Anarchy, war, and madness reigned. The law of unnaming, implemented by the First Council of Silence, was the painful but necessary cure. By removing the name, they had removed the ego. By removing the ego, they had removed the conflict. They had traded individual identity for collective peace. A perfect, quiet, stable world. Or so the ledgers said. But the echo of the couple in the plaza still haunted me. Their crime was love. Their punishment was oblivion. It didn't feel like peace. It felt like oppression. My mind drifted as my hand moved, the pen scratching a steady rhythm. The law was absolute. To speak, write, or even consciously form your own name in your mind with intent was to risk erasure. It was a psychic law, not a physical one. The silencers were its wardens, sensitives who could detect the ripple of a name being used. But the ultimate punishment was meted out by the universe itself by the very fabric of reality that our ancestors had somehow warped. Saying your name was like ringing a bell that only the abyss could hear. And the abyss always answered. The only place a name could exist safely was in the silent, locked vault of one's own subconscious. We all knew our names. We had to. They were given to us at birth by our parents, whispered once, and then sealed away. It was a paradox. The most fundamental part of you was also the most dangerous. It was a poison you had to carry your whole life without ever touching. I knew my name. It was a beautiful, simple word. I hadn't allowed myself to think it consciously in years. It was a sleeping dragon in the caverns of my mind. Late in the afternoon, while archiving a dusty crate of pre-fracturing documents slated for redaction, my fingers brushed against a folio that felt different. The paper was brittle, the binding made of real leather, not the synthetic stuff we use now. It was a private journal, somehow missed by the initial purges. I opened it cautiously. The handwriting was elegant, looping cursive from a bygone era. Most of the names had been crossed out with thick, black ink, the work of some long-dead archivist. But on the last page, a single entry remained, untouched. The resonance is not a punishment. It is a side effect. They misunderstand the nature of the silence. They have built a prison when they meant to build a sanctuary. The key is not to sever the connection, but to change its frequency. One can become a whisper in the grand cacophony instead of scream, but it requires an anchor. A name cannot be owned. It must be shared. The words made no sense, yet they resonated with the strange echoes in my own mind. Resonance, cacophony, anchor. It was the language of a forgotten science or a forbidden religion. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was heresy. This was knowledge that could get me erased just for reading it. I quickly scanned the page, my eyes catching on a small, hand-drawn symbol in the margin, a circle bisected by a single, wavy line, like a quiet river. Suddenly, a cold dread washed over me, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I looked up from my corral. Across the cavernous rotunda, standing on a balcony on the opposing side, was the silencer from the plaza. He was too far away to see what I was reading, but he was staring directly at me. There was no mistaking it. He wasn't just observing the archive. He was observing me. I slammed the folio shut, my hands trembling. I shoved it back into the crate, burying it under a pile of mundane shipping manifests. I grabbed a fresh ledger and dipped my pen in the redaction ink, my movements clumsy, frantic. I tried to calm my breathing, to smooth my thoughts into the flat, placid state of a good citizen. But the words from the journal were now branded onto my memory. A name cannot be owned. It must be shared. The silencer remained on the balcony for another 10 minutes, a silent, gray statue of judgment. When he finally turned and melted back into the shadows, I felt no relief, only a cold certainty. He knew. He didn't know what, but he suspected something. He had sensed the ripple of my discovery. I had always been a keeper of the official silence. But now, I was the keeper of a new and dangerous secret. The journal was a loose thread in the seamless tapestry of our world, and I knew, with a terrifying clarity, that I had to pull on it. But what would unravel if I did? The world? Or just myself? Sleep offered no escape. It was merely a different kind of prison. In my dreams, I was a spelunker navigating the deep, crystalline caverns of my own mind. The air was cool and still. In the center of the largest cavern, sleeping on a bed of black obsidian, was the dragon. Its scales were the color of twilight, its breath a slow, rhythmic tide. It was beautiful and terrifying, and I knew, with the certainty of a dreamer, that it was my name. I never got close. In my dreams, as in my waking life, I was held back by a profound, instinctual fear. To wake the dragon would be to invite the abyss. And so, night after night, I would simply stand at the edge of the cavern, a silent observer of my own sleeping identity. But tonight, the dream was different. The echo of the erased couple had disturbed something deep within me. The dragon was restless. It twitched in its sleep, a plume of golden smoke, like pollen, escaping its nostrils with every exhale. and for the first time, I felt a desperate, agonizing urge to walk forward, to reach out and touch it, to speak its name and claim it. I woke with a gasp, my body drenched in a cold sweat. The gray light of dawn seeped through the window of my small apartment in Sector 7. The dream felt more real than my waking life. The yearning it produced was a physical ache, a hollowness in my chest that the stale air of my room could not fill. Was I really? I was the archivist. I was C-812, G-54. I was the man in the gray coat who lived on the third floor. These were labels, functions, descriptions. They were shells. The creature in the cavern, the sleeping dragon, that was the core. And I was becoming terrified that if I didn't learn to wake it, it would die in its sleep, and I would become a hollow man for good. My fear had a name, though I cannot speak it. My greatest fear was not erasure. It was fading, becoming just a function, a ghost haunting the halls of the archive, my inner world shrinking until there was nothing left but the dry dust of redacted facts. But I also had a dream, a secret hope that was as dangerous as the dragon itself. Her name, her designation, was the Weaver from the Silk District. I had met her a year ago at the Mid-Autumn Market. I was buying bread. She was selling shimmering, hand-woven scarves. The light had caught the silver threads in a shawl she was holding, and for a moment, it looked like a captured constellation. Our eyes met, and in that brief, unguarded second, I saw a flicker of something that was not a function or a role. I saw a person. We began to meet for walks along the old canal, our conversations a careful dance of approved topics. The weather, the quality of the harvest, the architectural integrity of the new aqueduct. But in between the words, in the shared silences, something else was being communicated. I learned her, by the way, she noticed the small things, the pattern of moss on a stone, the specific shade of blue in a twilight sky. She learned me, by the way I would fall silent, my gaze distant, lost in the echoes of the city. She was my one anchor to a world outside the dusty ledgers. She was the color in my monochrome life. My dream was simple, and therefore impossible, to one day sit with her by the canal, under a sky full of real stars, and share our true names. To give her the one gift that was truly mine. A fantasy so reckless it was tantamount to a death wish. This inner conflict was tearing me apart. The archivist in me screamed for caution, for adherence to the rules that kept me safe. The man who loved the Weaver wanted to burn those rules to the ground. And now, the journal's cryptic words had added fuel to the fire. A name cannot be owned. It must be shared. I had to see her. I found her in her workshop, a bright, airy room filled with looms and spools of colored thread. The air hummed with the gentle clatter of her work, a counterpoint to the oppressive silence of the archive. She sat before a large loom, her fingers flying, weaving a tapestry of a forest scene. She didn't have to look up to know it was me. The archivist is far from his books, she said, her voice a low, melodic hum. Her title for me was a gentle tease. The books were becoming suffocating, I replied, moving closer. I watched her fingers mesmerized. Her identity was here in her creation. She poured herself into the threads, her personality expressed in 1,000 shades of green and brown. She had found a way to be herself without ever speaking her name. I envied her for it. Is something wrong? She asked, finally pausing. She turned on her stool, and her eyes, the color of warm honey, searched my face. You look haunted. I wanted to tell her everything. About the couple in the plaza. About the echoes. About the dragon in my dreams. About the silencer who was watching me. About the forbidden journal. But each word was a risk, not just to me, but to her. To even speak of such things was to invite suspicion. I had a bad dream, I said, the words tasting like ash. It was a pathetic understatement. She reached out and took my hand. Her touch was warm, her fingers calloused from her work. It was the most intimate contact I'd had in months. The city is full of bad dreams, she said softly. You just have to learn to weave them into something else. She gestured at her loom. This was meant to be a field of flowers, but the threads felt somber today. So now it is a dark wood. It is still beautiful, is it not? Her simple wisdom was a balm, but it also highlighted the chasm between us. She had accepted the world and found a way to create beauty within its constraints. I was fighting them, being torn apart by them. What if you can't weave it into something else? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What if the thread is just a loose end, and if you pull it, everything unravels? She grew very still, her hand tightening on mine. The playful light in her eyes was replaced by a deep, profound seriousness. This was the conversation we never had, the one that lurked beneath all our talk of weather markets. Then you must ask yourself, she said, her voice low and intense, what is it that unravels? The tapestry or the weaver? Her question struck me with the force of a physical blow. Was my identity the thing I was creating, my life, my relationships, my cautious existence? Or was I the weaver, the secret self, the dragon in the cavern? And if I pulled on this thread, this mystery of the journal and the echoes, which one would be destroyed? I looked from her earnest, worried face to the half-finished tapestry of the dark wood. I saw my own choice laid out in threads of silk. I could stay here, in this beautiful, constrained world she had made for herself, and learn to weave my own darkness into an acceptable pattern. Or I could follow the loose thread into the unknown, risking the entire tapestry for a truth I might not survive knowing. And as I stood there, torn between the safety of her love and the siren call of a forbidden truth, I knew I had to find the source of that journal. I had to find out what a whisper in the cacophony was. My fear was immense, but for the first time, my curiosity was greater. Could I have both? Could I pursue this dangerous path and still keep her safe, keep this fragile connection we had built? Or was that the cruelest paradox of all, that in searching for my true self, I would have to lose the only person who made me feel like I had a self to begin with? The symbol from the journal, the circle bisected by a wavy line, was my only clue. It was a key, but I had no idea which lock it fit. For days, I searched the public sections of the archive, cross-referencing pre-fracturing cartography and civic symbols. I found nothing. The symbol had been systematically erased from official history, which only confirmed its importance. If the state wanted something gone, it meant it was worth finding. My search forced me to change my routine to access sectors of the archive I rarely visited. I felt the silencer's presence more frequently now, a cold spot in the air at the end of a long aisle, a fleeting shadow on a distant catwalk. He was watching, waiting. The pressure was immense. Every query I made felt like a gamble, every unusual request for a document a potential betrayal of my intent. I was a spy in a house of history, and I was running out of time. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a redacted treatise on water management systems from before the fracturing. In a diagram of the city's old underground canals, I saw it. The symbol wasn't a drawing, it was a map. The circle was the old reservoir district, now a dilapidated, half-abandoned warren of warehouses and tenements. The wavy line was a specific, now-defunct aqueduct, Canal 73. The symbol marked a location where the canal ran directly beneath the central reservoir. It was a long shot, a ghost of a clue, but it was all I had. That night, I left my apartment and headed for the reservoir district. The journey was a descent. The clean, orderly avenues of the central sectors gave way to narrow, winding streets slick with grime. The air grew heavy, thick with the smells of coal smoke, stagnant water, and unidentifiable cooking. Here, the presence of the silencers was less overt, but the sense of surveillance was replaced by a more primal caution. This was the city's forgotten underbelly. I found the entrance to Canal 73 behind a rusted iron grate, hidden by a mound of refuse. Prying it open, I was hit by a blast of cool, damp air that smelled of stone and decay. With a small, state-issued glow rod for light, I descended into the darkness. The tunnel was a perfect cylinder of cut stone, the floor slick with a thin layer of slime. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of water seeping through the walls and the frantic beat of my own heart. After walking for what felt like an eternity in the oppressive black, I saw a faint light ahead. It wasn't the white, sterile light of the city, but a warm, flickering orange. As I drew closer, I began to hear sounds. A low murmur of voices, the clink of glass, a snatch of whispered song. The light was coming from a series of alcoves carved into the canal wall, each one covered by a thick blanket. I had found it. The Whisper Market. I pulled aside one of the blankets and stepped through. The change was dizzying. I was in a makeshift tavern, a wide cavern lit by dozens of tallow candles. The space was filled with people, but it was unlike any crowd I had ever been in. They were talking animatedly, their faces alive with expression. They gesticulated, they laughed, quietly, but with genuine mirth. An old man with a face like a crumpled map was playing a stringed instrument, its melody sad and sweet. They were the city's outcasts, its fringe dwellers, people who lived in the cracks of the system. A woman with eyes as dark as the tunnel approached me. "You're new," she stated, her voice a low rasp. "Lost or looking?" "Looking," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "For what?" "We have memories, if you have the coin. A taste of pre-fracturing wine. A song with forbidden words. What's your poison?" "I'm looking for a symbol," I said, and with a piece of charcoal I brought, I drew the bisected circle on napkin. Her eyes narrowed. She studied the symbol, then me. A long, tense silence stretched between us. "That's not a thing," she said flatly. "That's a person, and he doesn't like visitors." "Please," I insisted, my desperation overriding my caution. I found it in a journal. It spoke of resonance, of the cacophony. At those words, a change came over her. The suspicion in her eyes was replaced by something else, a flicker of fear, or perhaps reverence. "You're either a fool or you're more dangerous than you look," she whispered. "Wait here." She disappeared into the depths of the cavern. I stood alone, feeling the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on me. These people were taking an immense risk just by being here. A single silencer raid could erase this entire community. They had built a fragile ecosystem of shared secrets, and I was an unknown variable. The woman returned, followed by a very old man. He was stooped with age, his skin thin as parchment, but his eyes were startlingly clear and sharp. He leaned on a gnarled wooden staff. He was the librarian I had read about, the keeper of this forbidden place. "The archivist," the old man said. His voice was a dry rustle, like turning pages. It wasn't a question. "How do you know?" I asked, stunned. "My business is knowing things that are meant to be forgotten. You're the one who feels the echoes, the one the silencers are watching. I have been waiting for you." He gestured for me to follow him, leading me away from the tavern into a smaller, quieter alcove. The walls here were lined with shelves, not of official ledgers, but of real books. Bound, printed, pre-fracturing books. It was a treasure trove of heresy. "You've read a page from the Journal of the First Heretic," the old man said, his eyes boring into me. "But reading is not understanding. Tell me, archivist, what is a name?" The question caught me off guard. "It's a word. A label." "A label," he scoffed. "That is the state's answer. A label is a dead thing. A name is a vibration, is a piece of the universe's own song given to you to hold, is the frequency of your own soul. Before the fracturing, people sang their songs so loudly, so selfishly, that they drowned out all other music. They created the cacophony, a psychic scream of a billion egos that drove the world mad." He paused, tapping his staff on the stone floor. "The first silencers didn't seek to control. They sought to heal. They discovered that by suppressing the name, the anchor of the ego, they could quiet the scream. The law of unnaming was a desperate, planetary-scale act of psychic medicine. Erasure wasn't designed as a punishment. It's what happens when a single, raw, unprotected voice suddenly shouts in the middle of that infinite, hungry cacophony. It gets consumed." I stared at him, my world tilting on its axis. The neat, black and white narrative of oppression I had been building crumbled into shades of gray. The silencers weren't just jackboot thugs. They were the descendants of doctors who had administered a terrible, but necessary, cure. "But the journal said," I started, "it said you can change the frequency. Become a whisper." "Ah," the librarian's eyes gleamed with a fierce light. "Now we come to the heart of it. The cure has become a disease. The silence has lasted too long. We have forgotten how to sing, even softly. We have traded our souls for safety. But the first heretic, the man who wrote that journal, he found a way. A way to reclaim your name, not by shouting at the universe, but by grounding it, shielding it. It requires an anchor, as he wrote. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You, archivist, are unique. Your mind, for whatever reason, has a natural resistance to the silence. You remember the echoes. This makes you more vulnerable, but it also means you are capable of learning the song again. I can teach you. I can show you the truth of what this world is and what it could be. His offer hung in the air, a terrifying, exhilarating promise. For my entire life, I had been an observer of absences, a cataloger of voids. He was offering me a chance to understand the substance, the very thing that had been removed. It was everything I had been searching for. But his eyes held a warning. Be warned, he said, his voice grave. Once you see the true shape of our cage, you can never again be comfortable living inside it. The knowledge I offer will shatter the peace you have known. It will make you an enemy of the quiet. It will cost you. Are you prepared to pay that price? The price, I was beginning to learn, was sanity. The librarian, whose only given identifier was the keeper of words, led me deeper into the warren of tunnels beneath the reservoir. He moved with a surprising agility for his age, his staff tapping a steady rhythm that seemed to calm the oppressive darkness. We arrived at a heavy iron door, which he unlocked with a large, ornate brass key. The archive, you know, is a lie of omission, he said, pushing the door open. This is a library of truth. I stepped inside, and my breath caught in my throat. We were in a vast, circular chamber, its walls lined not with shelves, but with thousands of small, crystalline cylinders, each glowing with a soft, internal light. The air itself seemed to hum, a low, resonant thrum that I felt in the bones of my skull. It was like standing inside a living beehive of light and sound. What is this place? I whispered, awestruck. This is a memory palace, the keeper explained, his voice filled with a quiet reverence. Built by the first heretics, each of these crystals contains a memory, not a redacted report, but a true, subjective experience. A first-person recollection, complete with the thoughts and feelings of the individual. He took one of the cylinders from its alcove. It was warm to the touch. Before the unnaming, our ancestors developed a way to record pure consciousness. They thought it was the key to immortality. They didn't realize they were building the instruments of their own madness. He gestured for me to come closer and held the crystal to my temple. Don't be afraid. Just listen. The moment it touched my skin, my world exploded. It wasn't a vision. It was a deluge. I was standing on a balcony overlooking a city of impossible, glittering spires. It was beautiful, but the beauty was drowned out by a noise, a deafening, soul-shredding, psychic static. It was the sound of millions of egos screaming for attention all at once. Look at me. Remember my name. I am important. I exist. The raw, unfiltered desires, fears, and ambitions of an entire populace crashed over me like a tidal wave. It was the cacophony, a storm of pure, weaponized self-absorption. I saw people in the streets below clutching their heads, screaming, driven to violence by the sheer, unbearable noise of everyone else's inner monologue. I felt my own sense of self begin to fray, my thoughts dissolving into the overwhelming psychic maelstrom. I cried out and stumbled back, ripping the crystal away from my head. I fell to my knees, gasping, the phantom noise still ringing in my ears. The quiet of the memory palace felt like a physical balm. Now you understand, the keeper said gently, helping me to my feet. That is what the world was. That is the madness our ancestors fled from. The law of unnaming was not a choice. It was the only option. It was like turning off a planet-wide broadcast that was driving everyone insane. He placed the crystal back in its slot. The first silencers were sensitives, like you, but stronger. They learned to project a field of psychic quiet, to dampen the ego broadcasts of others. Erasure, as I told you, is what happens when someone bypasses that dampening field and transmits on the old, forbidden frequency. Their name song is a beacon in the chaos, and the residual psychic energy of the cacophony, what's left of it, rushes in to consume them. It's not a punishment from a state, it's a law of psychic physics. I leaned against a pillar of rock, trying to process the revelation. Our entire society, our silent, orderly world, was a quarantine zone. We were living in a self-imposed prison to protect us from a monster of our own making. The silencers weren't tyrants. They were guardians, jailers on a planetary scale, holding back a tide of psychic insanity. The man in the gray coat who was following me, he wasn't just an enforcer. He was a doctor, and I was a potential patient showing dangerous symptoms. But the people in the market, you talk, you share things, I stammered. What do you survive? We live in the margins, he said. We whisper. We keep our communities small. We build our identities on shared action and trust, not on the broadcast of a name. We have learned to live in the quiet, but we have also preserved the knowledge of what was lost, and the knowledge of what could be. He led me to the center of the room, where a single, larger crystal pulsed with a gentle, rhythmic blue light. The first heretic, the man who wrote your journal, he believed the silence was only the first step. The ultimate goal was not to remain silent, but to learn to sing a new kind of song. A song that doesn't broadcast outwards to the cacophony, but inwards to a specific receiver. A song for an audience of one. He gestured to the cryptic sentence I had memorized. A name cannot be owned. It must be shared. It's not a metaphor, archivist. It's a technical instruction. To safely reclaim your name, to be able to think it, to know it, to be it without being consumed, you cannot do it alone. You need an anchor. An anchor, another person, the keeper said, his eyes locking onto mine with an unnerving intensity. Someone with whom you have a profound connection, a bond of absolute trust and love. When two such people share their names, only with each other, it creates a closed circuit. The psychic energy of a name song doesn't broadcast into the ether. It grounds itself in the other person. The name is no longer a selfish shout into the void, but a sacred whisper that says, I exist, and my existence is intertwined with yours. The bond itself becomes a shield against the cacophony. My mind flew instantly to the weaver, to her warm hands, her honey-colored eyes, the way she saw the world. Our connection was the most real thing in my life. Was it strong enough? This is the secret the silencers fear most, the keeper continued. Not rebellion, not violence, but the possibility that we could reclaim our identities without bringing back the madness. That we could have both peace and selfhood. They believe the only way to keep the monster in its cage is to keep us all in ours. They have forgotten that there is a difference between silence and peace. I stared at the pulsing blue crystal, at the library of stolen souls around me, and the full, terrifying, beautiful scope of the truth settled over me. There was a way out. Not for the whole world, not yet, but for an individual. A way to wake the dragon in the cavern of my mind and not be burned alive. It was a path of immense risk, one that required a leap of faith so profound it was almost unimaginable. It required trusting another person with the very essence of your being. Is it possible? I asked, my voice trembling with the weight of the question. Has anyone ever actually done it? The keeper's face grew somber. A deep sadness entered his eyes. The first heretic tried. He and his partner. They were the first to attempt the ritual of the shared name. What happened to them? I pressed. The old man was silent for a long time, his gaze lost in the glowing crystals. The theory was sound. He finally whispered, his voice raspy with ancient sorrow. But their execution was flawed. The bond must be perfectly balanced. A perfect equilibrium of giving and receiving. Theirs was not. One of them loved more. One of them trusted more. And in that tiny imbalance, the cacophony found a crack. He turned to me, his expression grim. The anchor must be as strong as the person being anchored. If it is not, the one who is weaker, the one whose self-identity is less solid, doesn't just ground the energy. They absorb it. They become a living sacrifice. their consciousness burned away to shield the other. One of them spoke their name and became whole. The other became an echo, a mindless, empty shell. The revelation in the memory palace left me shattered. The path to selfhood was not a triumphant reclamation. It was a razor's edge, a terrifying gamble where the price of failure was the soul of the person you loved most. The knowledge was a poison. Every time I looked at the Weaver now, I wouldn't just see the woman I loved, I would see a potential sacrifice. I had to tell her. To keep this from her while wrestling with the possibility of using her as an anchor felt like the gravest of betrayals. Our entire relationship was built on the unspoken, on trust that flowed in the quiet spaces. This secret was a stone in that river, blocking the current. I found her not in her workshop, but at our spot by the canal, watching the sluggish green water slide by. The setting sun painted the sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. She must have sensed my turmoil as I approached, for she didn't smile. "You carry a storm inside you, archivist," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the water. "I have to tell you something," I began, my voice hoarse. "Something dangerous." And so I told her. I didn't tell her about the keeper or the whisper market. To do so would endanger the entire community. But I told her of the fragments I had found, of the true nature of the silence and the cacophony. I explained the theory of the anchor, the closed circuit, the possibility of reclaiming a name by sharing it with another. I tried to frame it as a philosophical discovery, a piece of forgotten history. As I spoke, I watched her face change. The warmth drained from it, replaced by a pale, rigid mask of fear. This wasn't the beautiful, abstract truth she might have imagined. It was a monstrous, practical danger. "So this is what you've been chasing," she whispered, her voice trembling. "A ghost story, a myth that promises you a way to what? Say a word? And for this, you've been sneaking around, drawing the attention of silencers? For a fairy tale?" "It's not a fairy tale," I insisted, my own frustration rising. "It's the truth. It's the key to everything, to being whole." "Whole?" She finally turned to look at me, and her eyes, usually so soft, were bright with anger and hurt. "I thought I was whole. I thought we were whole. What we have here now, is that not enough for you? My work, my life, this city, I have never needed a name to feel alive. My identity is in the things I do, the people I care for. But you're willing to risk all of it, to risk us for a sound. It's more than a sound." I shot back, stung by her words. "It's the core of who I am. Don't you ever feel it? The emptiness? The feeling that you're just a role? A costume? Don't you want to know who you truly are?" "I already know who I am," she cried, standing up. "I'm the woman who loves a foolish, reckless man who is in love with a ghost. A man who would rather chase a dangerous fantasy than live in the real world with me." The chasm between us had become a gaping canyon. She saw my quest as a rejection of her, of the life they had built. I saw her fear as a failure to understand the deepest part of me. We were speaking different languages. Her identity was external, woven into the fabric of her life. Mine was internal, a locked room I was desperate to open. "I'm doing this for us," I said, the words feeling weak even to me. "No," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "You're doing this for yourself, and you're going to get yourself erased. Or worse. And I can't stand by and watch you do it." She turned and walked away, her shoulders stiff with the pain I had caused. I stood by the canal, the beautiful theory of the anchor turning to ash in my mouth. The one person I would have trusted with my soul now saw that soul as a threat. The circuit was broken before it was even attempted. The next few days were torture. The silence between us was no longer the comfortable, intimate quiet we had shared. It was a cold, heavy void. At the archive, the silencer's presence became constant. He no longer hid in the shadows. He would stand openly at the end of my aisle, his featureless gray coat a constant, unnerving judgment. He knew I was close to something. The psychic pressure was escalating. One evening, consumed by despair and a desperate need to understand the final part of the puzzle, the ritual itself, I made a reckless decision. I had to go back to the memory palace. I had to ask the keeper how one could ensure the balance was perfect, how to perform the ritual without sacrificing the anchor. I slipped out into the night and made my way back to the reservoir district, my senses on high alert. The streets felt more dangerous than before, the shadows deeper. When I arrived at the hidden entrance to Canal 73, my blood ran cold. The heavy iron grate was bent outwards, torn from its hinges. My heart hammered in my chest. I scrambled down into the tunnel. It was silent. The warm, flickering light of the Whisper Market was gone. The air was cold and dead. I ran, my footsteps echoing unnaturally in the confined space. I reached the cavern of the market and stopped, horrified. It was a scene of utter devastation. Stalls were overturned, goods scattered and trampled. The blankets that covered the alcoves were torn to shreds. But there were no bodies, no signs of a struggle, just absence, an erasure, a mass erasure. They were all gone. The woman with the dark eyes, the old man with the stringed instrument, the entire community of whispers, wiped from existence. Their echoes screamed in the sudden, terrible silence of the place. A noise from deeper in the tunnels spurred me on. Panic gave my legs strength. I ran towards the memory palace, praying the keeper had escaped. I reached the iron door and found it, too, breached. Inside, silencers in their gray coats were systematically smashing the memory crystals. The humming of the room was gone, replaced by the sharp, sickening crunch of shattering glass and the hiss of dying light. In the center of the room, the Keeper of Words was on his knees, flanked by two silencers. Standing before him was the man in the gray coat, the one who had been haunting me for weeks. He held the large, blue crystal, the one that held the key to the ritual, in his gloved hand. A futile effort, librarian, the silencer said, his voice a low, chilling monotone, devoid of all emotion. To hoard the past is to poison the present. You are a sickness. We are the cure. The keeper looked up, and his eyes found me hiding in the shadows of the doorway. There was no fear in his face, only a profound, heartbreaking sadness. He opened his mouth, and I saw him form a word, a name, his own, a final act of defiance. Before he could speak it, the lead silencer gestured in a wave of pure psychic force. A wall of absolute silence slammed into the old man. The keeper slumped forward, not erased, but broken. His eyes went vacant, his mind wiped clean. A living shell. The lead silencer then turned his head, his featureless face looking directly at my hiding spot. He knew I was there. He had known all along. He is not the one we want, the silencer said. Our target is the archivist. He will lead us to the others. And then, from behind the lead silencer, a figure stepped out of the deeper shadows. A figure I knew, a figure that ripped the very air from my lungs. It was the Weaver. Her face was pale as death, her eyes wide with a terror so profound it looked like madness. She wouldn't look at me. She stared at the floor, her body trembling. You did well, the silencer said to her, his voice holding the barest trace of something that might have been approval. Your civic duty is noted. You saved him from himself. Betrayal. The word was a physical blow, a blade twisting in my gut. She hadn't just walked away from me. She had gone to them. In her fear, in her misguided attempt to save me, she had led them here. She had sacrificed an entire community of souls to protect me from a truth she couldn't accept. The silencer took a step towards me. I was trapped. My mind was reeling, the world collapsing into a vortex of grief and horror. The woman I loved had just destroyed my world. But as the silencer advanced, the captured keeper slumped on the floor, lifted his head one last time. His eyes were vacant, but some shred of instinct remained. He looked at me, and his hand moved just slightly, pointing not at me, but at the blue crystal in the silencer's grasp. And his lips formed a single, silent word, a final gift of forbidden knowledge. Balance. What did it mean? What final secret was he trying to give me before his mind was shattered forever? Panic is a blinding light. It screams, it flails, it gets you caught. But beneath my panic, a cold, clear thought surfaced, a gift from years spent in the silent, ordered halls of the archive. Analyze. Assess. Act. The silencers were between me and the only exit I knew. The Weaver stood like a statue carved from regret, a ghost at the edge of the scene. My capture was moments away, but the Keeper's last desperate gesture, his silent word, balance, had given me a sliver of purpose. The blue crystal in the lead silencer's hand was the key. It wasn't just a memory. It was a schematic, a set of instructions for the ritual. Whatever happened, I could not let them destroy it. I did the one thing they wouldn't expect. I didn't run. I stepped out of the shadows and into the dim, ruined light of the memory palace. "You were looking for me," I said, my voice shaking but clear. The lead silencer stopped. His head tilted slightly, an unnervingly robotic motion. The anomaly. The mind that doesn't forget. "You have been trafficking in forbidden knowledge. Archivist C. 812 G54. You have disturbed the quiet. The quiet is a cage." I shot back, my eyes flicking to the Weaver. She flinched as if struck, her gaze still fixed on the floor. "You traded our souls for peace and called it a bargain. Souls are a fiction, a dangerous myth that birthed the cacophony," the silencer stated, his tone flat, doctrinal. "There is only the pattern of the self, and its tendency toward chaos. We impose order." He took another step forward. "Your pattern is irregular. It must be smoothed." He was going to do to me what he had done to the Keeper. Wipe my mind, leave me a placid, empty vessel. In that instant, I made my choice. My life as an archivist was over. My quiet, careful existence was a ruin. The only thing left to do was to seize the truth or be extinguished. With a yell, I lunged, not at the silencer, but at a tall, unstable stack of shelves laden with a few remaining memory crystals. I slammed my shoulder into it, putting all my weight behind the blow. The shelving unit groaned, and then crashed downwards with a deafening roar of splintering wood and shattering crystal. It created a momentary wall of debris and cascading light between me and the silencers. In the chaos, I scrambled over the wreckage, my sole focus on the blue crystal. The lead silencer, surprised by my direct assault, had momentarily loosened his grip. I snatched it from his hand. The crystal was cold, humming with a latent power that vibrated up my arm, and I ran. I plunged deeper into the tunnels, away from the known exit, into the labyrinthine dark. I could hear the silencers behind me, their movements swift and silent. They didn't need light. They could sense my psychic trail. The tunnels twisted and turned. I was running blind, my only light the faint blue glow of the crystal in my hand. I stumbled, my lungs burning, my mind a frantic mess of betrayal and fear. The Weaver's face, pale and horrified, was burned into my vision. She had done it to save me. The thought was both a comfort and a torment. She loved me enough to destroy me. I rounded a corner and my heart leaped. A faint gray light. An exit. It was a maintenance grate leading up into the service corridors of the city's power conduit. I pushed it open and scrambled into the narrow, metallic passageway, slamming the grate shut behind me. I was in the city's circulatory system now, a maze of pipes and wires. I ran, following the tunnels upwards, towards the surface, toward the sky. I finally emerged into the cold night air through a ventilation shaft on a rooftop high above the city. I was exhausted, filthy, and utterly alone. The city spread out below me, a grid of quiet lights and orderly streets, a perfect, peaceful society that I was now an enemy of. I was a fugitive. I collapsed against a chimney stack, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I looked down at the crystal in my hand. Now that I was away from the psychic dampening field of the silencers, its hum was stronger. I held it to my temple. This time I was ready. I braced myself. The memory flooded in, but it was not the chaotic horror of the cacophony. It was the memory of the first heretic. I saw through his eyes, felt his desperate hope. I saw him with his partner, a woman with eyes like fire. I felt their love, a bond so powerful it felt like a physical force. And I saw the ritual. I saw the flaw. The Keeper was right. In their ritual, the first heretic's love was a fierce, possessive thing. He wanted to reclaim his name for himself, and he needed her to be his shield. Her love was a selfless, devotional thing. She was willing to be the shield, to give everything for him. The imbalance was catastrophic. When they spoke their names, his name song, powered by his ego, was a shout. Hers was a whisper. The cacophony, sensing the imbalance, latched onto the weaker signal. Her consciousness was consumed in an instant, but in its place, it formed a perfect, unbreakable shield around him. He became the first and only man to reclaim his name and survive. But he was alone, his victory costing him the one person who made it meaningful. He had his name, but he had lost his anchor. The memory ended with his silent, unending scream of regret. The crystal's light faded. I understood. Balance. It wasn't about the amount of love, but the nature of it. It couldn't be a transaction, a shield for a soul. It had to be a perfect, selfless exchange. A gift given freely, with no expectation of return. One couldn't use an anchor. The anchor had to choose. And then came the most difficult choice of my life. I could disappear. I could flee the city, live as a nameless hermit in the wilds, clutching this terrible knowledge to myself. I could survive, or I could go back. I could find the Weaver. Going back meant walking into a trap. The silencers would be everywhere. They would be watching her, waiting for me. But as I looked out over the silent city, I realized I couldn't run. Not because I wanted to perform the ritual, but because I had to face her. I had to understand her choice, and she had to understand mine. Our story couldn't end in a ruined library and a silent betrayal. What is a self without the other? The first heretic's memory was a testament to that hell. He had his name, but he was more of a ghost than any nameless citizen. He was defined by an absence. I would not become him. My choice was clear. It was terrifying, and it was probably a death sentence. But it was the only choice that felt real. I had to go back for her, not to use her as an anchor, not to save myself, but because my identity, my name, my very soul was already inextricably bound to her. To abandon her would be to abandon the most important part of myself, the part she had helped me discover. I would give her a choice, not the choice to be my shield, but the choice to understand. I would show her the memory in the crystal. I would explain the balance. And then, whatever she decided, we would face the consequences together. I tucked the crystal into my coat, the cold glass a stark reminder of the terrible power I now wielded. The power to become whole, or to utterly destroy the one person who gave my life meaning. Was this love? Or was it the ultimate selfishness to drag her back into the storm she had tried so desperately to save me from? The question echoed in the empty chambers of my heart as I began my descent back into the city of silence. Finding her was the easiest and most difficult thing I had ever done. I knew where she would be. Our spot. The bench by the canal where our fragile world had shattered. The city was on high alert. The gray-robed silencers were a more visible presence on the streets, their patrols more frequent. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Moving through the city was like navigating a minefield, my every sense screaming with the proximity of the hunters. But a strange calm had settled over me. My choice was made. The fear was secondary to the purpose. She was there, a solitary figure huddled on the bench, wrapped in one of her own shawls as if to ward off a chill that came from within. Her face, illuminated by the cold municipal lamplight, was a landscape of devastation. She wasn't being watched, I realized. They had used her, and now they were waiting for me to fall into the trap she represented. She was the bait. I didn't approach from the street. I emerged from the shadows of the canal path behind her. "Weaver," I said, my voice a low whisper. She jolted, a choked sob escaping her lips. She didn't turn around. "They're everywhere," she breathed, her voice ragged. "You have to go. You have to run." "I'm not running anymore," I said, stepping around the bench to face her. I sat down, leaving a careful distance between us. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. "I came back for you." "To condemn me?" she asked, her voice thick with self-loathing. "I deserve it. I destroyed everything. Those people. I heard them in my head just for a second before they were gone. A chorus of screams. Because of me. You did it to save me," I said. It was not an accusation, nor an absolution. It was a fact. I was afraid, she confessed, tears tracing paths down her cheeks. I was so afraid of losing you to this idea. This ghost. I thought if they caught you, they would just fix you. Make you forget. Make you safe. I never imagined. I know, I said softly. And I did. Her love for me was a practical, protective thing. It was the love of a weaver, trying to mend a tear before it rent the whole cloth. I took out the blue crystal. Its light pulsed gently in the gloom. I know everything now, I said. I want to show you. I want you to understand what I was searching for, and what it costs. She flinched from the crystal, but my gaze held hers. Trust me, I whispered. One last time. Hesitantly, she nodded. I moved closer and gently pressed the cold crystal to her temple. I watched her face as the first heretic's memory washed over her. The ecstatic hope, the flawed love, the devastating ritual, the eternal, lonely regret of the survivor. I saw the understanding dawn in her eyes, followed by a wave of profound, empathetic horror. When the memory ended, she was shaking, her hand covering her mouth. The balance, she whispered, the words stolen from my own thoughts. It wasn't a formula. It was a gift given freely, I confirmed. A perfect equilibrium. That's the key, the only way to shield against the cacophony. We sat in silence for a long time, the quiet of the city wrapping around us. The trap was closing in. I could feel the subtle psychic pressure of the silencers tightening their cordon around the district. They were patient. So what now? She finally asked, her voice fragile. Do you still want to do it? To try the ritual? And here it was. The final, terrible choice. That's not my decision to make, I said, looking her directly in the eye. I came back to give the choice to you. We could try to run, though we likely won't get far. Or we can let them take us, and they will wipe our minds, and we will become strangers living in the same city. Or we can do this. Here. Now. But I will not ask you to be my anchor. I will not let you be a sacrifice. I took her hands in mine. They were freezing cold. If we do this, I said, my voice steady, I will be the anchor. I will be the shield. Your song is more important. You create beauty that the world can see. You weave light into the darkness. My work has only ever been with shadows and dust. The world needs your song, not mine. I was offering to be the sacrifice, to have my consciousness burned away so that she could be whole. My love for her was no longer about possession or even about a shared future. It was about her existence. That was the balance. I was finally ready to give, with no expectation of return. Tears streamed down her face, but she was not crying from sorrow. A strange, radiant light was growing in her eyes. You foolish, beautiful man, she whispered. You finally understand. But you're wrong. A song is meaningless without someone to hear it. An identity is a void if it isn't seen by the one person who matters. She tightened her grip on my hands. The first heretic was wrong. The keeper was wrong. They thought the ritual was a transaction, a soul for a shield. But what if it's not? What if the goal isn't for one to survive, but for both to be known? And in that moment, I saw the true path. Not a sacrifice, a fusion, a new interpretation of the ancient, flawed text. A whisper for two? I breathed, the realization dawning on me. Not a shout to the world, not a shield for one. A secret shared only between us. Our names don't need to exist for the world. They only need to exist for each other. It was the ultimate heresy, to subvert the ritual itself, not to reclaim a public identity, but to forge a private one, a shared reality for an audience of two. We would not try to be a whisper in the cacophony. We would be a pocket of perfect sound in a world of silence. The silencers were close now. I could feel their cold presence just streets away. We didn't have much time. We stood up, facing each other, our hands clasped. We looked into each other's eyes, and in their depths, I saw not just my reflection, but my home. No more fear, she said, her voice clear and strong. No more ghosts, I replied. And then, as the first gray-robed figure appeared at the end of the canal path, we spoke. We didn't shout. We didn't proclaim. We whispered. A secret passed from my lips to hers, from her lips to mine. The two most sacred, dangerous, and beautiful sounds in our universe. Elian, Lyra, the world did not end. The cacophony did not descend. There was no flash of light, no erasure, no glorious transformation. There was only a profound, internal click, a sense of settling, a quiet rightness. The dragon in my cavern was not slain, nor was it unleashed. It simply opened its eyes, looked at me, and I looked back, and we knew each other. I was no longer just the archivist. She was no longer just the weaver. We were Elian and Lyra, not to the world, not to the state, not to the silencers who were now striding towards us, but to each other. And that, we realized, was the only thing that had ever mattered. The lead silencer stopped before us. His cold, psychic gaze swept over us, searching for the telltale ripple of a name song. He found nothing. Our secret was so small, so intimate, so perfectly balanced between us that it created no disturbance. It was a closed loop, invisible to the outside world. "You will come with us," the silencer said, his voice flat. He had failed to find what he was looking for, but we were still fugitives, still guilty of sedition. We did not resist. They led us away, separating us. I didn't know if they would wipe our memories or lock us in separate cells for the rest of our lives. I didn't know if I would ever see her again. But as they pulled me away, I looked back at her one last time. She met my gaze, and a small, secret smile touched her lips. There was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet, luminous certainty. They could take our freedom. They could take our futures. They could erase our public records and reduce us to alphanumeric codes. But they could not take the secret we now held. They could not unknow what we now knew. My name is Elian. Her name is Lyra. In a world where you cannot say your own name, we had discovered the profound, revolutionary truth. A name is not meant to be said. It is meant to be heard. And as long as one person in the universe still heard my song, I would never truly be silent. I was no longer an echo. I was real, and I was not alone.